Thank you for joining us today, first of all. I will maybe briefly introduce all of you. I will try to do so because you're doing so many amazing things that it will be hard to do this in a couple of minutes. But let's maybe start with a person who is at the intersection of governance, ethics, implementation, and everything together, Dr. Chantal Brandt-Larsen. She knows exactly what is not working and where. So I think her perspective will be amazing today. Thank you for joining us, Chantal. Then we have Elsa, who is presenting us today with the media perspective. So one of the probably fastest moving and highest pressure environment. She knows how biases actually are created, amplified within the media environment, and what kind of workflows should be built into what kind of tools should be built into the workflows instead on top of them. We have also amazing Dr. Jacqueline Kuchera, who is joining us from the Swiss Parliament. She's responsible for the library, data, and research there. And I think it's like one of the most challenging section of responsible AI, because the sensitivity of political environment, the data that are collected there, and how AI responds to the data, whether it not oversimplifies them, and many, many other aspects are really important. So thank you for bringing this perspective to us today. And our only man at the panel today, Ricardo Echavarriaga. Thank you very much for joining us from the Swiss Center for Responsible AI. I think that you bring a very important perspective in between the research, the academia, and the governance and practice itself. So it will be wonderful to hear you today. So I would like to start maybe with a question connected a bit with what happened during the last few weeks, because a lot of events were happening on the global stage. One of them was India AI Summit, with its diffusion first approach. Then we have also the US AI Act that is about innovation first. And in the middle of this, we have our own European AI Act, which is actually treating AI more as a risk and then possibilities. So I wanted to ask actually all of you, what's your perspective considering this kind of different approaches, whether UA is really asking the right question? So is this AI safe for the citizen versus is this AI making our country better or improving our country? What do you think? Maybe let's start with Chantal.
So it was interesting, just before I was having some conversations in the audience, and I think it's about language, because about 2 years ago, I was in the US doing something at South by Southwest, and it was the same argument of, is it innovation or is it, risk? And I don't think that it has to be either or. I think that creating the right environment where we actually value all customers brings innovation. So that's kind of my perspective. Do we have risks and do we have harm? Absolutely, yes. I think we're probably going to go into that, so I'll leave space for others that you can delve into that.
Yes, I agree, especially on the risks. So maybe just to quickly explain, we built an AI assistant that scans our text for stereotypes and biased writing. And if we do not change the style, how we write right now, AI is reproducing and amplifying those stereotypes. So I fully trust in innovation, but if we innovate in a kind where we even widen the gap for female and male, for example, or amplify stereotypes, I don't think the innovation is going into the right direction.
So I'm serving the members of parliament with my teams. If I think about AI and these risks we have, I in particular talk about sovereign system. I think it's really protecting everything which is sovereign in thought, but also whatever we produce. If you can't trace, verify whatever gets out in these research tools, we cannot have any trust in democracy any longer. I think that's for us very, very important, transparency, and not just according to the EU regulation transparency, but it goes far deeper than that.
Mm-hmm.
In certain circles, there was this saying that US innovates, China copies, and EU regulates.
Mm-hmm.
And that has driven many narratives over years. And I think we all know that this is not entirely true. And if we link that to the news cycle, every 2 years we have a new, say, critical moment on AI. So a few years ago, we had the AI Act coming in, or we have the AI Safety Summits coming in. Now we have the AI Summit in India, next year in Geneva. So we seem to think that every moment is a decisive moment for AI. And that's a very dangerous thing. So what we need to understand is that none of these positions that we see in the US, in the EU, in China, and other jurisdictions is specifically pro-innovation or pro-protection of dignities, but it's a mix of how the legislator interprets that and how the lobby mechanisms act onto that. So it's a little bit harder than that, and I cannot really say that there is right now a single answer, and there will never be, because this is an evolving problem. And what we need to then trace what are these elements that bring risks. Is it a matter of sovereignty? Is it a matter of transparency? Is it a matter of technical robustness? And what are the different elements that bring agency to the stakeholders that are involved? And that goes beyond this false dichotomy that was mentioned at the beginning of regulation versus innovation. Because without innovation, there is no impact, either positive or negative. So we cannot go off without innovation.
Yes, exactly. But then do you think that Europe is not maybe treating this a bit too seriously? So it's putting a guardrails, as you said, we don't know what will happen in 2-3 years with AI. So maybe it should be like working on the system that are already working, like cybersecurity and so on, instead of really this kind of strict points that we need to fulfill as organizations before we move forward, or otherwise we will lose a lot of money.
Well, we have been losing a lot of money over the last decades with the talent going to other places and not having enough power to scale the innovation that comes from the EU. I think that one of the issues that we perceive right now is not as much that the EU regulation is strict or not, is that we don't know exactly how strict it is. And if we go and look at how governance is actually deployed, we have a legislative action that comes from the AI Act, but how is that translated into the operation of organizations is not embedded in that instrument alone. It is supported by the technical standard, is defined by how the notified bodies will do compliance assessment. And there are many elements in that process that are not defined yet. So the regulation in the EU, despite all the celebration of the release of the AI Act, is not completed yet. And we should take advantage of that process, that current process, to steer in the directions in which this can be operationalized in the right way. This is not saying that the AI Act is perfect, but there are still a march of maneuver to make this more operational and to clarify that uncertainty.
Okay.
For me, it's not that it's strict. Actually, I believe in it being strict. But the guidance has still not come out from the second. I think it's because it's trying to do something very difficult. It's trying to sort out the actual human challenge that we have underneath, which is problematic. So I remember being at Ringer about that you run wiki events where we put more women into Wikipedia. But actually the challenge with that is there is a structural one. It means that a lot of women that we put in get rejected. So there's a human problem in itself around the systems that we have and the data that we have. So how do we even regulate that on a human level, let alone the data level? So it's not that it's strict, it's that we're at a time where we're trying to go into a arena where AI is going to come into coexistence with us. But how do we regulate that? And I don't think it's strict. I think it's a very difficult challenge that we're going forward, and it's making us come face to face with the actual problems that we have, is that we don't have fairness. We don't have these things. We were talking about the technical piece in finance. In Switzerland, if you come from another country, you are charged more for your insurance. Therefore, we already have bias built in into our credit scoring. But yet, EU AI Act says that high risk and high harm is credit scoring, but we already have bias built in. So how do we deal with that?
But I think it's not, for me, it's not about regulation, really. I think the EU Act has done what it could really do. I think it goes very far at certain points. But in the end, I mean, you can regulate as much as you like, you know. But how do we actually build these systems? If I take our example, and you talked about data, I mean, first of all, you need to know what's inside, what kind of data you have. Data is like in research of AI systems, it's always biased. The most data you have inside, well, the most probable that this comes out again as a reply. So we couldn't use it except we would actually know exactly, or would be able to develop those models and give like, because if I take a concrete example, debates, we have usually majority debates. So everyone on the majority, if the 200 national councillors, they can speak for 4 minutes. If they're minorities, obviously minorities are far fewer people, you know, they never will pop up if I ask a questions in such system. It's always going to be a bias. I'm never going to have the right answer. It's always going to be like a generic answer. I need to be sure that I know which kind of system democratically I can build. That's why, for example, the parliamentary services, the Bundesrat in Germany, they are building their own systems, their own sovereign systems from scratch with multidisciplinary crews, because not developers can know how to build a system. And those at the output, they need to know exactly how this works to be able to get the trustworthy and the fact-checked replies.
So I think that we all agree that actually the principles are not the hard part, like the regulations are not the hardest part. The hardest part is to implement them in real like workflows and real life organizations. So if you had to name like one biggest bottleneck that is now existing between implementing responsible AI and making it successful in organizations, what would it be? Maybe Elsa.
I think maybe from our example, what we see is the AI literacy. So we can embed it into the workflow and they get like a check on their text. But if they don't understand why they need to change, for example, the stereotypical writing, so why does it even prompt it, then they won't trust in it. So that's why we built in an explanation. So it doesn't only tell them why or that something stereotypical, but it also tells them why and how it could be read if it's written like this and how they can change it. But they don't need to do it. So they still have the freedom if they take it over or not, but they understand why it was flagged in the first place and based on what data it was flagged. I think transparency and creating understanding for how to use it is also very important.
Chantal?
For me, and I kind of disagree on this minority thing, because I've been at sessions at pharmaceuticals and they go, well, we can't do everything for minority when it comes to data. And yes, you get outliers in data. The challenge is when they talk about the minority, they're actually talking about a global majority. So there's a lot of global majority data missing within healthcare systems, and that is leading to harm. So I would say that you do need to address the data and this dysfunction. The same in democracy. If we just look at what's happening geopolitically, if a number of minorities were listened to, we maybe not have been in this situation. So you always go to the margins about the ones that are possibly affected first versus the majority. Just want to add something in transparency. I think that something like the Swiss sovereign apparatus, when we could at least try and understand how did it really get to that decision? You have some transparency behind the data, the weightings and so forth. That is a big step forward. But if you use other models, you don't get that transparency. But you were asking me to pick one.
Yeah, exactly. I asked you to pick one. And about this, about transparency, and I think human oversight is also very difficult to implement in organizations. We were also discussing this. But maybe firstly, let's focus on the transparency. It's actually, transparency means a lot. It can mean documentation, explainability, audit trails, or even user visibility. So from your perspective and from your experience, are there fields of transparency that actually matter more and some of them are just becoming noise? Or do you think that transparency overall is very important and the first step to implement into the organizations?
Well, if I look at the many different constructs that fall within transparency, including interpretability, explainability, I would say that as for many of these questions, there is not a single answer that applies to all cases.
Mm-hmm.
So with AI systems, of course, we come and say, we must have explainability, and otherwise we cannot use it. Despite the fact that many of us take pharmaceutical products to treat diseases for which we don't have explainability. We know that they work because they have gone through certain processes. We have some information about the principles behind, but we don't have explainability. And despite being something that has an incredible impact in our well-being, both positive and negative, and despite the fact that we know that there can be side effects that appear post-deployment, we as a society have accepted that system that we may say is not entirely transparent. So what we need to eventually refrain to go into certain absolute levels that apply all across the board and move towards the calibrated trust. What is the evidence that I have at hand? And there are parts of transparency that go beyond explainability that helps sometimes overcome those limitations to reach that level of trust, even in situations where the impact in individuals, society, and organizations can be highly significant.
Can I completely disagree? We may be taking things, but the impact is not equal for us all. Women are 50% more likely to die from cardiovascular. Within 5 hospitals in Switzerland, there is still a measure used for kidneys for Black people, which means that I would not get kidney care. So what AI is forcing us to do is to have that transparency and say, are we okay with that? How are you actually measuring it? Because we're about to give a recommendation to an AI. Maybe we didn't understand that before, but maybe we did as women. There's a lot of women here where we know that there's a lot of conditions in menopause, things like that, where we have been completely ignored for decades. And it's only now that we're getting some kind of visibility and possibly some money or funding, very little. So I think it's like we're not actually happy with what we're getting, but yet we're supposed to be trusting the AI. So the two actually go hand in hand. If we want the adoption and the innovation of the AI, we need to understand what's the transparency and where do we possibly have the gaps for groups. Women, global majority. We were talking about neurodiversity, right? Girls are less likely to be identified as neurodiverse. All of these things, this is innovation, this is customer. We call it discrimination and things like that. But if we use a business language, it's about customer revenue, customer ROI, customer adoption.
Okay, thank you. That was very, very insightful, Chantal. Thank you also. But this is very wide topic, definitely the biases, the data. I think that it actually deserves the separate panel, to be honest. But if we focus on the dimensions of the EU AI Act, and as I mentioned, the human oversight, it's also very important as far as transparency. And I think that a lot of people are still mentioning that human oversight is just a checkbox, like a human in the loop, and we're just checking this, it's done, everything is okay. But on the other side, it's very, very difficult to implement this into everyday work, everyday life, everyday objectives in the company. So from your experience, you could name, if you wish, you can anonymize the names if you want, but if you could give me an example of where the human oversight actually failed and why, and who should actually own this topic for it to work. Maybe you could start, Elsa.
Yes, so producing millions of articles every month, human oversight would be impossible, as long as we think as a person is the human oversight. So we think it as a system, so just implement it as our assistant now works. So the editor that himself decides or herself decides if it's if he wants to apply the change that's suggested by our AI assistant, but he has all the info, she has all the info why she or he needs to change it. Of course, this came based on a leadership decision that we implement this and that we will go there, but we want to keep the decision with the editor himself. So he also starts to use it and understands it, because we just cannot, in the mass that we produce every day, it's just not possible to do it otherwise. We see a 95% engagement rate by the journalists. So we see, because it's very easy, applicable, they actually use it. And then we also have a different perspective of, we do a lot of summaries now. So every article has an AI summary at the beginning, which is just the reality. 50% of the articles are not written anymore worldwide. It's produced by AI. So if we have biased data, which is then reproduced used for articles, we do need to check it somehow. Right now, it's done quite easily, so it just mentions that it's summarized by AI. So take it not for granted, because right now we don't have the right solution yet, where we can clearly say this is 100% accurate. Yeah. So I think it's yes, embedded in the workflow, but think it as a system and not as one person saying yes, that's okay.
Jacqueline?
I think we have like two cases. We have one case where human oversight is still ongoing. We have like a semi-automated indexing system for all the businesses. There are like 400 to 600 new businesses, push down motions, initiatives and so on per session, which means 4 times a year. And they are semi-automated index now. This means like put 200 different topics on it. And what we found is it's good that there is still human oversight. We keep that running for a year now, and it's getting better, obviously. And we can tell after a year the quality is far better than before, obviously. But we're still not at 90%. So this human oversight, it's still very important. I'm convinced this is going to change rapidly. Same for the press. We have like also around 500 articles every morning. At the moment, we tag them manually and choose 40 articles, but this is going to change as well. And it's going to be a semi-automated system until actually the machine is trained as good as we can leave it running. For us, complicated in our business, if I say so, a member of parliament expects us to pick all the relevant articles. A system is not going to pick certain articles because he doesn't think it's the, he can't know whether he has forgotten one. That's why I believe they're still going to be important that we have a certain expertise. And that's for me human oversight. Put people there where it's still important. And well, replace them, you know, for the part they don't need it. About data also, for me, humans oversight is also within the data. Data has to be really very good data. And people need to know what kind of data they draw from. Otherwise, they can't interpret. And I think that's where I join you. We need like this literacy, AI literacy everywhere. And I think that's a very important point, because we're going to continue with having the need for human oversight.
And in organizations, Chantal, Ricardo, do you see problems where the organizations are having with implementing human oversight, or do you see that they're only checking, as I said, the boxes with the human in the loop and that's all, we did it, yeah, we're okay? Or is it really something that they're putting their attention to?
I'll let you challenge first. I've been a bit too challenging, maybe.
Okay. but before I don't think we disagree on the previous topic, by the way. No, I think there are several examples where this human oversight may become problematic. One widely documented is the use of content moderators, where the cost of performing that task is huge to the human that are moderating. That, on the one hand, is a volume that cannot be managed, and on the other hand, the exposition that these moderators have to material that is extremely hard from a psychological perspective is a high toll in their mental health. So that's one example of the use of human oversight that, on the one hand, is not necessarily fit for purpose, at least not 100%, and it comes at a high cost to the humans that are involved in the process. Another aspect, and this comes with this volume of people may be tasked to oversee, is that, again, this is not one size fits all. If we ask people to check every single document, that is simply not humanly possible. So then we go into these hybrid systems where there is a initial semi-automatic flagging, and then someone can then take a final decision based on that, which can be a way to alleviate the issue. Another aspect that I have seen recently in certain areas is that the feeling that of those who are doing the oversight, that they are training their successor. And then the fears about job replacement and to what extent they can trust that system in the way that they basically put me out of job can become an aspect that will play into the lack of trust on the people who perform that task.
I like that. No, I do. No, I do. The only thing I would add is that for me, fundamentally, I don't see companies, I mean larger companies, really rethinking how people get stuff done. So that constant interaction, if we think about it that way, that's just wearing people out. That's just not really, to me, an oversight. I'm working now with the smaller companies, and we're doing it in more workflows where the outcomes come to them that need to be for oversight. And then I've done another company where what is it the humans doing, what's it the AI is doing, and where should they be collaborating and where should they have oversight. But I gave this analogy to my husband because we speak a lot. When he comes up for a coffee, we both work in the basement. And I said, it's like they've put electronic cars out, but they haven't put the charging stations. So they've gone AIs out, but haven't really rethought what the human role is. And I think this is what you were describing in the Parliament piece as well, which is just saying, well, but it can't do this piece. And so the reason it's a checkbox exercise is they haven't thought about where does AI play a role? Where does the human play a role holistically? And that is creating this role of fear and this role of scarcity about where do I sit with this? Where should I sit with this? So I hope we start moving forward, that we actually do rethink about how work gets done and we make these decisions.
And also coming to this point, because in high pressure development and deployment, actually what I believe companies are still sticking to is the safety, legal compliance, security, because those risks, when it fails, are just immediate. while, for example, fairness and inclusion is put a bit aside, is a bit delayed, because obviously the results are not seen just as fast as the other ones. So do you think that these trade-offs are actually unavoidable, or maybe we're just putting pressure to different kind of risks that we should?
I think, again, it just comes down to language. Yes, they are definitely focused on the compliance because they don't want to meet the full weight of the law. So it's the stick first, but they're still going to have to answer to the board, as in they're not getting the results that are anticipated. So what do we do now? And I mean, I am for DE&I. I'm in many groups, but I think we should start talking about it and what the gains are around customers. So yeah, unfortunately, it is a lot of compliance versus innovation.
It is, right?
But I think we have compliance, but we have compliance with regulation, with the law, but we also have compliance with the organizational governance. And what are the business goals that we need to fulfill? And there will be always tensions between the business interests, between individual interests. There will be tensions between different ethical principles that guide either the governance at a regulatory level or the organizational management that we cannot avoid because they are intrinsically there. What brings many issues is, since you were mentioning this pressure to access to market, to make the next round, or to survive the next 6 months. So what brings many of these issues is to think about these trade-offs as a post-hoc assessment. When things are almost to go out, and then we say, but have we checked on the bias? Do we have documentation about that? So if we go to the principles, we think about the accountability and the establishment of an organizational governance that has thought about those tensions before you're reaching that point is actually your lifeboat when things are starting to go sideways. And if you are at that stage and you're trying to solve those trade-offs ex ante, then most likely you will fail.
I think the challenge when they're not doing the organizational goals, they're actually not going back to the customer. So we haven't gone to the customer. Customer experience has actually gone down, not up. And someone was saying to me, like, when you contact Swisscom now, you can't even speak to a human being, right? So is that with intention what we really want? We haven't had the conversation about the organizational goals, or what is it you actually want to achieve? And so people kind of come to me and say, we don't even know what we're doing. We've been told we're doing AI, but we don't know why. We don't know what we're doing. I mean, these are really honest conversations. Sorry.
I step into that exactly because I think if you have this image, I mean, there are studies out also from McKinsey and others, efficiency, I mean, the companies would like to get more efficient, we would like to get more accurate or more quality, in what we're doing. But at the end of the day, we're actually far from being efficient. 85% of companies who have introduced AI, they say we are not more efficient. The problems, they're organizational. People don't know really where they have to go, what kind of automation is possible or what kind is not. The customer experience in the end, I mean, that's the customer, he's not used to it. So we don't know yet, you mentioned that before, because of the human. We built that, but there is nowhere to have the other part prepared, So women, men, they're not prepared to do that. So 15% think of the companies that think we're more efficient. So what do we do wrong?
Maybe to add on that, since you mentioned this, the involvement of the customers, and if we look at the principle of responsible research and innovation, the engagement with the stakeholders is one of the key pillars of doing that. And stakeholders are your end users, the people within the organization, because we know that we cannot just one day have an epiphany as a leadership, as a CEO, and says, let's go responsible AI, and everybody will follow. You need to manage that. You need to convince that. Why the engineers need to spend 20% more of their time testing for transparency if they don't understand why? What is the impact? Why am I doing something if the end user doesn't see the value? In some of my research work, more on the technical side, I worked on rehabilitation and prosthetic devices. And we know that many people with disabilities, they don't like the more efficient prosthetics from an engineering perspective because they want to be involved in performing the task, even if that makes the task slower, less precise. So from a robotician or engineer perspective, that system is less efficient. But from the user perspective, that system actually is not fit for purpose. And if we don't go and discuss with them, if we don't know what are the tensions that will arise when they see our product, when they see a prototype, the mock-up, or after deployment, I cannot prepare my organization or myself to address those tensions.
And that's what I step into that as well, because I think that's exactly the point we were actually lacking. I mean, you can have rules, regulations, you can have everything on paper, you can build systems. But if you don't do that with multidisciplinary teams, and here I'm talking not just different types of people inside the company. You mentioned customers, we need the whole process to think differently. Otherwise, we're not getting to grips, and we're not going to have an advantage with what these machines actually could provide for us.
Yep. Totally agree, but on the other hand, as we're saying about the organization, and as you mentioned, a lot of organizations just want to implement something connected with AI, some new tools, some new solution, and so on and so on. And they still don't know how to do this, because I think like this kind of responsibility with AI just is very not straightforward nowadays. So who is responsible for what? Who is the provider of the service actually? So it brings also a lot of confusion within the organizations, and they want to do this fast, and they want to do this right away to become competitive. And that creates also some kind of problems within organizations, right?
It can, but it shouldn't.
It shouldn't, but yeah.
Well, one of the things that I criticize on the mechanisms to promote innovation right now is that sometimes focus on certain on a subset of the things that people should know about launching a new venture. So it's very easy to get support and coaching on how to pitch and how to make a first business model, but less so on how to navigate properly the regulatory pathway. And I have met many founders that they think that they are very close to go through a regulatory process, and after 15 minutes, you understand that they are way, way behind, and they haven't received the proper training on that. I joke with some of my friends from the ethical community, the ethics community, not the ethical community. So I talked to some ethicists, and at one point, she was telling me, how do we know that we succeed in our effort of promoting a responsible approach we're talking about engineers? And half jokingly, I told her, the day we no longer have ethics courses at engineering school, that day we have made it. Why? Allow me to explain. It's not that I don't want people to be trained on ethics, but the way we have deployed that is just bringing a certain level of otherness to addressing responsible issues and ethical issues to the engineering craft. The day we think about ethics the same way we think about the methods in which we train a neural network or we define a loss function, that day I think we made it. When people that, and it not only applies to engineers, when learning to behave responsibly and adopting responsible practices is part of the craft of building a model and building a company, that day we will avoid these issues.
I think responsibilities for me also not only ethics or, all the governance or guidelines. It's also, I'm responsible that this output is correct and accurate. I think it's very important that we take responsibility when we actually shape such a system, and then, that's a good sign if ethics doesn't have to be taught any longer. But that's why everyone has to sit together, because also those who actually are at the end of the product saying, okay, the product must be that way exactly. So the developer can't know, and that's the difference. We are no longer in an IT world as we've been before. This research tools, they have to be developed completely different, and the responsibility for me, the lasting responsibility, we only can take together. Otherwise, we will gonna fail, and that's something to do with the AI literacy for me as well. Everyone actually has to understand, and not just sitting there or being taught, okay, I need to know that, but really shaping things together.
Mm-hmm. Before we end our panel, I would actually have 2 more questions at least, but more practical ones. If you could imagine yourself, I know that everything depends on the context and wider perspective and everything, but if you could just imagine yourself, very simple scenario, and what would you do, or what would you recommend to do? Never minding, for the purpose of this panel, never minding the context behind it. So, for example, a system meets legal requirements but fails your internal ethical expectations. Do you ship it?
No.
No, because what you do shapes your culture, shapes what's going to happen. And if you move those lines, you should have already defined your values, your strategy, and your non-negotiables. So if it was a non-negotiable, if it was your value, as in this is what we're going to put out into the world, you don't do it. Otherwise, what do you stand for? And you should have aligned that to your customers as well.
And if you stand for money?
Sorry?
If you stand for money?
I'm not Musk, so that's not me. I think that's actually what's driving a lot of the behaviors that we see, right? This short-term money piece, and yeah, so that's not me, anyone that knows me.
Maybe from a D&I perspective, we just see now what happens if they don't embed it in their culture, and if it's not part of their values, they get easily kicked off once the budget or the pressure is too high. So I think it should be just part of the culture of the company.
Definitely, I agree. Otherwise, it's not sustainable.
One of the areas that we are doing research on is the translation of these ethical principles and values into operational requirements, functional and non-functional requirements. So if you are developing a system that is not fulfilling the requirements, then you are just simply allowing to move that bar. And that bar could, if you allow yourself to move it from an ethical requirement, but also from a technical requirement, basically, you are not doing your job properly. So I will pledge for people to refrain to making a dichotomy. I will not move the line for the technical requirements, but I will move it for my values. So if you feel that someone is doing that, then probably is not the best person to do business with.
And that's the answer that I hoped for, obviously. So one final question. If you would have just one practical piece of advice to the organizations, to the startups, to the people who want to do something with AI and want to implement the EU AI Act's regulations, but not only to comply with them, but also to do something innovative with AI, what piece of advice would you give them?
I would recommend to ask the question, are we building AI systems that strengthen democratic judgment, or do we build that by distorting, simplifying, or obscuring information? So that would then contribute to democratic backsliding before we even recommend it. So just ask yourself, are we really building the right systems?
Elsa?
Maybe to add, are we building the right systems and who is building them and what data flows in them? Because as you said, the biases, for example, in the data is there, but can we train a system to identify those biases and not reproduce it? So yes, I think integration in the workflow is also one of the main success factors as well.
But I don't want to be the last one. My advice on this, not only for the AI Act, but my advice is to keep in mind that the impact of AI systems comes from the interplay with the individuals and groups that use it. This is what we call a socio-technical system. And when you do assessments about it, you cannot focus on the technical part alone, but you need to understand those interplays. Otherwise, you cannot really know what your system is doing or will be doing in the future.
Guess I gotta go last then.
Yeah.
What problem are you solving? Whom are you solving it for, as in your customers, and how? And that doesn't always need to be AI. If you have who you're solving it for, you are likely to not have the data in there, because if we had a gun amnesty as a bias amnesty, our data is completely screwed and biased at the moment. So therefore, we need to go and engage with those people at a human level and have them as part of oversight and making sure that we've got segregated data to represent them. But we need to know, where does that bias sit to build proper solutions to solve their problems.
Thank you very much. I think I'm out of questions for the moment, so I would like to give the floor to our participants. I think we have time for 2-3 questions from the audience. Please go ahead.
I actually came here with this question. I'm all for regulation in AI, obviously, but I feel like the biggest challenge is to implement this regulation in such a fast-growing and evolving topic, AI. So how do you do that effectively? How do you find the right regulation? How do you implement them? And also, how do you make sure that they are respected? So what are the consequences for the company that are not respecting it? Is it substantial, or is it just a slap on the knee?
Yet to be tested. So there's the compliance side, which I'll leave you maybe to the risk or compliance side. There's the innovation side. For me, it's about understanding what you have in your organization that you know about, and understanding what you don't have, understanding the limitations. So this, in practical terms, can be, for me, a simple form that you start to go out and understand what AI you have and you don't have, what bias might exist, security risks. All of these things fall into AI governance beyond the kind of compliance checklist of you might be doing something that might be harming someone. And then you're putting into place things like committees. So an ethical committee, for example, you have in place different committees depending on the size of your organization to be able to oversee that. You also have certain things like red teaming. So if you're putting in a new HR system, but please don't fix the system first. But I have seen a lot of HR AIs out there, which are causing me a lot of stress. And you were to then test, do I have if I put CVs into that, is it causing issues if it's a female CV versus if it's a male CV, for example? So you're testing what's actually happening with the system that's been designed. So it's a very short answer to a big piece, but I was trying to give you practical examples. Understand what you have, don't have, understand where the limitations are, where the opportunities are. It's not just about compliance. Design in actual ethical AI by design, it's kind of what I do. And then do exercises like red teaming. And it's not perfect to begin with. So I actually think you should have a good culture where you pick up things. And so culture actually is really important, but it's not sexy for a CEO to stand up there and say, hey, I'm going to do a culture program. Their share price will more likely go up by saying, I'm going to implement some AI versus the other piece.
Maybe one question.
Thank you. I hope my question is not too provocative, but I'm really wondering, like, isn't regulating AI kind of futile because it's kind of regulating human behavior ourselves? Because in the end, AI is producing what we have produced over the years. And then in the end, I think even more important to put more like on education, like provoke more, there's more important on critical thinking. Because let's be honest, if you read Fox News, it doesn't matter if it's produced by human or produced by AI. If you think, you will disagree if you put your mind, or you are certain disposed in a certain like say political direction, you will disagree. Which doesn't matter if it's written by AI, it's written by a human. So I was really wondering, like, isn't this now it's a lot of things are directed to let's regulate AI, but in the end, shouldn't actually we should just put more effort on education itself? Like children should just grow up being more critical. I mean, we also question our teachers, don't we? Like sometimes teachers do mistakes, and we were told like not to believe. I mean, in history books, we should interpret. We take it as a point of view, but we shouldn't believe what's exactly written. We should have our own opinions. And the same as we read a text written by AI or human, doesn't matter. We should have our own opinions informed. Even we go to doctors, sometimes we see a second doctor for a second opinion, right? So I think like it's really in the end. I mean, it's a lot more just on ourselves. And yeah, that's my point of view.
I think it's a very, very important thought question or message you just have brought up. I think it's very important to educate differently, younger, at schools, however, wherever. AI literacy is one thing to do, but the critical thinking, I think it's very, very important. I think we should take 2 steps back and really rethink that actually we humans, we have the intelligence, and this difference between the human intelligence and the artificial intelligence. If we fear the systems and we think we just consuming through the algorithms we have, I think that's a wrong approach. We really need to educate our children. We need to educate ourselves, everyone, companies, everyone, cultures, that we actually must remain on top of the artificial intelligence, and we still should steer it. That's why with building them, I think we need to be really standing together, do it, shaping it together. That critical thinking is the first thing, and knowing that the human intelligence is still far more intelligent if we start thinking than the machine one. I think we could have, with another approach, we could go far further with the use of the machines.
I think it's not an either-or situation. We still need to manage the risks that come with this type of technologies. And we may sometimes in this type of fora think that AI is the only thing that is happening, but there are many other things happening as well. So we need to look at these different technologies that may bring risks. At the same time, there are other elements in society that require attention. And it's important that these type of topics that are so hype that kind of suck the air of whenever we talk about investment, whenever we talk about innovation or even policy, that they don't prevent us of thinking about all these other elements that will influence our life. And also linked to the previous question, when we think about the compliance with AI Act, this is only a part of all the different things a company must comply with. So you need to also understand that it's not only the AI Act, it's data privacy laws, is discrimination laws, is trade laws that they need to understand. And if you think only about AI as the only thing that happens in the universe, then you may get a lot of media attention, but you're not solving problems, and probably you're generating quite a bit of them.
And you might surprise yourself probably very soon.
Just a small point to add. I think it goes beyond AI, as you said. I mean, social media has not a common regulate the ground now. And this is AI, for me, it's a global topic. It's not based on Europe and India and China. We will all have to need to find some common ground on the regulations. And we see it in, as we said, in social media, how many years we have it now, and there is still any regulation on how we want to, impact the next generation. So I think,
One last opinion.
I was going to say, is there a point? Yes, because we are putting AI upstream and it is increasing the amplification of what's happening. If you just look at Grok, for example. So it's not to say that yes, it is a human behavior, but actually it's only going to perpetuate it and make it worse and actually harm more people. So if we don't regulate it, then we're going to harm more people. That also means, and I love the child piece. So I'm a mum. I've got a 13-year-old and a 14-year-old. And I am really worried about the Swiss school system, which just relies on so much memorization. It's insane and pushes the kids on memorization. It actually doesn't really have a lot of critical thinking. So we do need to reshape what education looks like across many countries, because if we don't, the fact that people are listening to Fox News in the way that they are means that we have a leader that we do. So it was already happening. We are already losing critical thinking. So wouldn't assume that everyone can critically think, because unfortunately that's not the case. Otherwise we wouldn't be in the position that we're in, and we are losing things on democracy.
Mm-hmm. So before I let you go, I just wanted to let all of you know that we will be heading soon to the workshops. Now will be a short break to drink something, to stretch yourself. So feel free to spread a bit for a moment, and then just follow your colors of your stickers to the proper whiteboards. And I just wanted also to thank very much our panelists for this insightful session and for great answers and great feedback from you here on the stage. Thank you very much. I hope that it was also interesting for you as it was for me. And yeah, thank you for today.